Good, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Thursday, July 23rd meeting of the Committee on Policing and Community Engagement. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And the first thing I'd like to do is just talk about how the public can participate in this meeting. So if you'd like to share feedback during the public comment period, you must do so by hitting the raise your hand feature on the Blue Jeans app, and then we can acknowledge you and promote you to a speaker. Members of the public may also share their written comments with the committee staff in advance of the meeting by sending them to communications@unioncity.org. Comments sent into the committee staff in advance will be read during the public comment period, be read into the record. So this meeting will also be streamed live on the City of Union City Facebook page. However, we will not be monitoring or accepting public comments through Facebook during the meeting. All right, our next item is roll call. Emma, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Vice Mayor Emily Duncan.
Here.
Councilmember Pat Gakoskos.
Here.
Commissioner Melissa Schwen-Mallory.
Here.
Commissioner Michelle Williams-Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Jonathan Petty.
Here.
That concludes roll call.
Great, thank you so much. So next on our agenda, we have our first of two public comment sections. We'll have a public comment section near the end of the meeting, but we will also start with this public comment. So if there's anyone who's an attendee who would like to make a comment at this time, just hit the hands up feature and someone will acknowledge you and allow you to speak to the committee. Do we have any hands up?
We do not have any hands up at this time.
Okay, so for those of you listening, perhaps you'll share your thoughts with us later in the meeting. We will have another public comment section. All right, we're going to move on then to item 5, which is open business. These are items that were left over from our previous meetings. First item on here is online feedback that we've received since our last meeting. We're going to have those comments read into the record, and Lauren is going to read them for us. Lauren?
Yes, hi. So for those of you watching tonight, I'll be sharing feedback that was sent into us from the dates of July 16th through the 21st. So I realize that some of you have sent feedback into us since then and in the last couple days, and know that we will read that onto the record at next week's meeting. So starting off with our first comment, what policies or trainings does the police department employ to preclude racial profiling and unnecessary use of force on people who are arrested, people who are uncooperative, and people who are perceived as under the influence? What rates of arrests of people of color, specifically Black and Brown Union City residents, versus the demographics of the city? Are they proportionate? What are the rates of arrests by different communities within Union City, e.g. Casa Verde, etc.? Will Union City also adopt policies to defund the police department such that non-criminal events are handled by unarmed personnel like skilled social workers instead? How does Union City keep the police department accountable such that there are no blue wall of silence, or there is no blue wall of silence? Next comment. I believe our society has come to rely too heavily on public safety for matters they have not been trained to manage. Police officers are not mental health professionals. They are not equipped to handle individuals experiencing mental health episodes, nor should we expect them to be. It is imperative that mental health professionals be available to respond to emergency calls for help in our community. Police officers are not social workers. They are not equipped to manage family disputes where emotions run high and logic does not apply. It would be in our community's best interest to have social workers respond to such matters. I realize the city is experiencing unprecedented economic hardship and that additional funding for such services likely does not exist. This is why the only option is to pull from the police department budget to pay for the services our community desperately needs. Our officers should be dedicated to preventing crime in our city, and our detectives should be dedicated to investigating crimes that have been committed. It is not reasonable to expect them to also serve as mental health professionals and social workers. Next comment, do not even consider defunding our police. They have a hard enough job as it is without the city taking away their support. With the increasing crimes of porch pirates, stealing packages, gang members moving in, and the homeless flocking here due to the compassionate city policy, we need our valiant police officers more than ever. Next comment, and I think I only have a couple more here. I salute our UCPD for doing a great job policing our community. My question is, how can we enhance the racial and cultural sensitivity in our community? Does the PD have a systematic in-service and employment orientation to address those differences, including the use of appropriate force as needed? How about mental health assessment and stress management as a tool in dealing with crisis intervention? And the final comment, I understand from former trainees in the Union City PD that they are, I hope were, trained to shot to kill. I would like to see this Union City police policy discuss and analyze as to who, i.e. age, ethnicity, gender, has the policy statistically involved, under what circumstances, and can a more fair, just, and humane approach to policing be adopted in this regard? This is a police practice I've been personally privy to as a resident of Union City for the past 10 years on at least 2 occasions. No one would like their sons or daughters nor themselves open to this kind of inhumane police mentality nor conduct therein. Police officers' performance records should be maintained and monitored in order to terminate those who demonstrate an attitude of this sort, with no more than a second chance to improve. And that concludes the written comments sent in to us up through the 21st.
Thank you, Lauren. I just wanted to say that we're not going to respond to the written comments at this time. We do have them in the record. And what I would hope is during the next few weeks, during these conversations, many of the questions that have come into us will get answered. We'll certainly have the opportunity to hear from members of the police department, and some of those questions will come up. Some of them will be discussed. And at the conclusion of this ad hoc committee, this committee will have the responsibility of taking your suggestions and comments and incorporating them into a recommendation back to the City Council to include the things that we think, based on what you've told us, we should implement here in Union City to strengthen the relationship with policing and our community. That's our task, and we're committed to that. So please keep your thoughts and ideas coming. Don't think that because we don't respond to them in this moment that we're not taking them seriously and incorporating them into our thoughts. So the next item we have on our agenda is a presentation by Melissa, which talks about the Karen Act, which is Caution Against Racially Exploitive, Non-Emergency. She mentioned it to us a couple of meetings ago as something that she thought we would want to consider, and thought it would be helpful for all of us tonight to hear from her the highlights of what this act is. Melissa?
Thank you, Emily. I'm sharing my screen right now. Okay, I believe
Yes.
Emily has some slides to help with this presentation. So I'll wait for those.
Okay.
All right.
They're
Okay,
up.
and do you want to go to the next slide? Thank you. So as Emily stated, the Karen Act stands for Caution Against Racially Exploitative Non-Emergencies, and this was introduced by San Francisco County Board Supervisor Shaman Walton, and he said we have to stop calling 911 and the police and weaponizing on people of color because it literally means life and death for some of us. So that was a quote from him. And so what this does is it makes discriminatory calls to 911 for non-emergencies illegal. So if, this is definitely aimed at the barbecue Beckys of the world. If someone was to call the police solely based on someone's protected status, such as race, ethnicity, religious affiliation, gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity, and it's not actually an emergency, this would allow the person who's the subject of the call to seek civil remedy through the courts by suing the person that made the discriminatory call. And it also provides for criminal penalties as well. I wasn't able to find a lot more information on the Karen Act itself, but it is connected to the Assembly Bill 1550. That's the next slide. And actually, Assemblymember Rob Bonta and Supervisor Shaman Walton are worked together to author this Assembly bill. So it has a lot of the same rules to it as the Karen Act. So it adds a new section to the Civil Code and amends 2 sections of the Penal Code related to discriminatory emergency calls. And so, as mentioned before, the victim of a discriminatory call, could sue the caller for damages between $250 and $10,000 plus attorney's fees. And this applies to any member of a protected group under California law, which of course includes race as well as all the things listed previously on the previous slide. And it makes the discriminatory calls criminally punishable as a misdemeanor or a felony. And so they could receive a fine up to $1,000. They could spend up to a year in jail, or both, depending on the severity of the infraction. So it does have in the language of the bill a couple of things as far as the intent of the caller. So they have to intend to infringe upon the person's rights under the California or U.S. Constitution. They have to be unlawfully discriminating against the person. They have to cause the person to feel harassed, humiliated, or embarrassed. And they have to cause the person to be expelled from a place in which the person is lawfully located. And it has to damage the person's reputation or standing in the community, or damage the person's financial, economic, consumer, or business prospects or interests. And so any of those things would constitute an unlawful discriminatory call. And that's basically the summary of it. I wanted to leave time for if there's any questions.
Thank you, Melissa. I think at this point, what you've told us is this is a piece of legislation that is being considered, and we will make a note of that, and we will track it as it moves through the Assembly and the Senate. And if it becomes a state law, certainly the City Council will look at that and consider how it might be implemented here in Union City. So thank you very much for that update. We'll make sure that gets on our list of things to track. The next item we have.
And I was also.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just also thinking that maybe we could look at it and see if there's any version of that could be passed at a city level as well. But that'll go towards our recommendations later.
Yeah, and if there is something in the queue for the state level, it wouldn't make sense at this point, but we will certainly consider it later. We'll track it, see where it goes, and see how we can benefit from it here locally. Thank you. So next on our agenda is an update on the Obama Toolkit. we received some information from a member of the public who sent us a link to a toolkit that they thought might be helpful for us as we're thinking through these issues. And Jonathan has taken some time and looked into the toolkit and will offer us the highlights of what he's learned and how we might be able to use that. So Jonathan, thank you for that.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, Jonathan, and just let me know when to move to each slide.
Okay. All right. So this is the Obama Toolkit, a review of it. It's also known as the New Era Public Safety and Advocacy Toolkit for Fair, Safe, and Effective Community Policing. And it was developed by the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights Coalition. It was predominantly designed for building campaigns and coalitions, but for us, it also provides some good insights for places for potential action. Next slide. So some of the concerns that were highlighted in the report that communities might be concerned about include broken window policies instead of community policing, broken window policing instead of community policing, lack of police officer accountability to the community and familiarity with their community that they serve, lack of a community input, lack of community trust, especially amongst communities of color, racial and ethnic bias by officers, a criminalization of everyday activities such as being in a park after dark, also religious intolerance, disability bias, and collaboration with immigration authorities. The next slide. So over the past 50 years, several federal, state, and local investigations have looked into individual cases of police violence and found systemic patterns of discrimination and the use of force by police officers. In other words, the issues in Union City are not unique to Union City. So this graph is a representation of the structure of policing common throughout the United States and understanding the structural relationships of the federal government, state governments, local governments, law enforcement agencies, and chiefs of police are appointed by mayors, sheriffs are elected by the community. District attorneys, independent oversight bodies, and police unions will understanding that will help highlight where there's pressure points that can be used for making change. Next slide. So making change. What are you, our community, most concerned about? We, the community, need to identify the problems before we can start talking about solutions. So the report suggests deciding what changes to make and setting specific short-term goals, such as, do you want to change policy? Do you want to pass a new law? Do you want to change the structure and oversight of the local police department? And so the next 3 slides will talk a little bit about the highlights, what was highlighted as concerns and opportunities for change. Next slide. So policing approaches, determining an approach to policing such as community policing philosophies. And I'll give a definition of what community policing is. It's a philosophy that promotes organizational strategies that support the systematic use of partnerships and problem-solving techniques to proactively address the immediate conditions that give rise to public safety issues such as crime, social disorder, and fear of crime. Another approach is to increase transparency of data, access to data and transparency of it, such as access to body-worn camera footage. Next slide. So community interactions, things such as enacting First Amendment protections, such as establishing guidelines for demonstrations, and providing limits for police surveillance. Police and community response to crises, such as strengthening utilization of and access to services, and providing crisis training for police officers. And then profiling and bias-based policies, such as expanding the definition of profile to include all stigmatized groups and enacting policies that ban profiling. Next slide. And then officer standards, establishing accountability for misconduct and discipline, such as misconduct and discipline training programs and oversight for officers, police training input, reaching out to community to talk about what the police should be training on, transparency and accountability of training. And finally, use of force, such as prioritizing community respect and protection, enacting reporting requirements. And last slide. So I'll leave you with this quote that was in the toolkit. We all have a role to play in ensuring that the policing practices respect and protect civil and human rights. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan.
Mhm.
Sounds like a lot of the things that are outlined in that toolkit have been included in many of the comments that we've heard from our presenters and many of the comments that we have received in some of the online comments that we have received. A lot of information about training, transparency, accountability, community policing, and we've certainly heard all of those in previous comments. So thank you for that. You might just share that slide deck with us and we'll make sure it gets put on the website. And if anybody would like to revisit it from the public, they can see it on the website. But we can take that and factor it into our analysis and recommendations. So thank you so much for that. Did anybody have any questions they'd like to ask either Melissa or Jonathan at this point from the committee? I'm not seeing anybody act like they want to comment. Shall I go around and ask? Michelle, do you have any questions or comments for Jonathan or Melissa? Well, Melissa, we won't ask you. Pat, do you have any comments for Jonathan or Melissa? You're on mute, though. You're going to have to come off of mute.
Since you asked me, I'll just make a comment or question
Okay.
for Melissa. Melissa, I know that the Karen Act is based on someone named Karen in Sacramento, in San Francisco, that he reported to the police with her husband. I know that there was also something that says Ken and Karen Act. So it's only Karen that is included in the bill, or if you know of an additional name for a guy who also discriminate and make some calls that are not necessary. It's also like targeting racial profiling target or something like that. So it's only Karen, not Ken.
Of course, the act is aimed at any person, regardless of gender, who would make a discriminatory emergency call. I think it was a play on words because Karen is often a word used for white women who are making racist calls or doing racist, silly things that are very insensitive. So that's kind of why it's called Karen Act, but it does stand for those words, which is the caution against. Let me find it.
Yeah, I think there should be
caution against racially exploitative non-emergency. Yeah, it's an acronym. So, but it is a play on words.
Okay, so it's an acronym. Okay, that's all. Emily.
Yes.
That's my question.
Okay. Melissa, did you have any questions for Jonathan on the toolkit?
No, thank you for doing all that research.
Yes, thank you for both of you.
Yeah, I think that as we follow this piece of legislation, it may get renamed as it moves through the House, and it may or may not come to us as what it was called in its initial form. But we will keep it on our radar, and we will continue to track it and see how we can incorporate it into recommendations that we make for the City Council. Okay, if there aren't any other comments, Jonathan, I should have asked you, do you have any questions for Melissa on the Karen Act? No?
No questions. I believe the same as you that they'll probably change the name as it goes through process. Yeah. And I'd be interested to see how it grows through the process, how it changes.
Yeah. So we'll keep AB 1550 on our list, and we'll track that and make sure that we stay current on how it will be implemented. All right, thank you all for those presentations. We're going to move on now to new business, item 6 on the agenda, and this is our community listening session. Tonight we have 2 presenters that are joining us, and our first presenter will continue the conversation we're having with the New Haven School District, Marcus Lamb. And then our second presenter tonight comes to us from the Union City Police Officers Association to talk with us about being a police officer here in Union City and some of the things in his experience that are working, that are not working, and possibly some things that we could change. So with that, let me ask Emma if she would first promote Marcus to a speaker so we can hear his thoughts.
Yes, I just invited him, so there'll be probably a few seconds lag. Marcus, are you there?
Yes, I'm sorry. My camera is turned around.
I
apologize, everybody.
That's okay. Take your time.
And Marcus, I'll keep time for you, and I'll give you a heads up when you have 1 minute remaining for the 10 minutes.
I apologize, everybody. I'm having a hard time with this turning my video around.
So do you want to just talk with us without video? You can do that.
Yeah.
Looks like we see your screen, but we don't see your face. So if you want to just talk with us without us seeing you, that's okay too, sure. Unless you think you can figure it out. Whatever works for you.
I'll just speak, and you know what? I'll make an appearance on the other side of the camera before the end of the before the end of the 10 minutes. How about that?
That'd be perfect. Okay, so, you're on.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Good evening, Vice Mayor Duncan and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to speak on behalf of New Haven this evening. When invited, I wasn't sure what to say. I was kind of trying to figure it out, but I have to say, after listening to a friend of mine, Ms. Manny Allen, who spoke last week to the committee, she shared something that really struck me, and she I've been in the community as an educator for over 22 years. I'm not from New Haven. I'm not from Union City, but I know Miss Allen is, and her story about her experience with the police being affected by when she was a child, and through her experience, not something that happened to her, but something that happened to her mother. It got me to think that I really need to be here to present the perspective of our students. And I'm not sure if you guys are going to have the ability to have students share with you if there's an opportunity. I think that would be a wonderful thing to do. But the best that I can, I spoke to a lot of our staff who are around this summer right now and tried to get a little bit about what is UCPD? What do the police officers mean to our students? And to some surprise and to no surprise, some of the reactions are that there's a lack of trust. There's fear when you see an officer come onto campus, even for not a business reason. There's concern. We have students who are scared. They get nervous. Sometimes they see an officer coming at them and walking towards them, and they think they've done something wrong. Our students do. And I think and they feel intimidated. And what really struck me is that we're talking about elementary school, middle school, high school students, and these are young kids, and they have these feelings already that many adults may have, yet at such a young age. And from what I'm understanding, it's not necessarily because of what's been done directly to them, but it's because of the experiences they see with how their family members are treated, or unfortunately, social media. Fortunately or unfortunately, social media, but that paints their perception of our police officers. In talking to a lot of our staff, they shared experiences where students were worked with on campus with a police officer, and it was not a positive experience. And this would be even when the student is a witness to something, not, or just trying to help out. But what's also struck me is that further conversations with all the staff that I spoke with, and my experience too as a teacher and administrator in New Haven, is that we're really talking about a small percentage of experiences. When talking more about what happens when police are on campus or interact with staff or students, most of them we in New Haven have very positive experiences. We get a lot of experiences where our police are very respectful. We have officers that come that are empathetic. They're here. They come to, we have officers that come to try to engage in different ways to change their perception. But I guess what I'm getting at is it takes, sometimes it's a small one or two or a small percentage of things that happen that really paint this different picture for our students. And so while I share this, I also I'm a very hopeful and optimistic person, because I think our relationship with UCPD, New Haven and UCPD has been positive. And I think there are positive ways that we can help each other, because I do believe that, because of a small number of instances, it creates a stereotypical perception of police officers. And we, like I said, we do know that our police officers that have the hugest hearts, that have the best intentions. I think they all do. But again, it's the small experiences. When talking and asking and thinking about what can UCPD to do to kind of, let me go back. Our students, they're still impressionable kids. I think a lot of our students have perceptions, have ideas, not based on their experiences, but based on what they see, what they hear, what's happened to others. But they're still impressionable. And so, I see that there are many opportunities for UCPD or police in general, I'm sorry, to create a positive image. A lot of our staff I talk to love when police have come onto campus and engaged with students in positive ways. Had conversations, just asking students how they're doing, what they like in school. On occasion, we've had officers come and play with the students. We've had them come speak to classes of students, speaking about their own experiences, both as a student and both as a student and a police officer. What the word that really came out in a lot of my conversations is that, we really want our police officers to be able to humanize themselves, because sometimes we just see a uniform, or students just see a uniform. but they don't know who's behind the badge, who's behind the uniform. And I think that's really important. Um, as educators, we deal with the same thing because I think, sometimes our students, depending on their experiences, see us just as a teacher or see a teacher as sort of this authority figure. But it's not until they get to know who we are as educators that they really begin to trust us, begin to change their image. And so, um, so as I know there is a lot out there these days, negative perceptions of the police. I think that there is a lot of hope. There's a lot of opportunities for our community our officers to really engage with the community differently. Thinking about doing things. A word that was used as kind of non-traditional. A word that was used with me was non-traditional. Thinking about how our officers can engage our community, our students, especially at a young age, differently. Um, you know, for whatever reason, the uniform was a big barrier for a lot of our students to try to get to know somebody, an officer. So if they're able to come onto campus and engage, maybe not in uniform, definitely not with police equipment. And so, I think building relationships with our community, building relationships with our students, letting our students know at a young age that our police officers are people just like they are. And I think that's really important in Union City because for those of us who have been in Union City for a long time, we know that lots of people born here, raised here, continue here, and raise their families here. And so if we are able to impact our youth today at a young age, I'm sure many of them will raise their families here. And if we can create a different perception, I think that's all for the positive. And so, again, I thank you for your time this evening. I hope that I was able to speak a little bit to the perspective of our students and hopefully, just open the door for New Haven to be a partner in thinking about how we can help promote the perception of our police officers in the city. And I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera around just so I can at least, you can see, all right, let's see, is this working? Okay. Are you guys able to see me?
We can see you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your time, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Marcus, for joining us and sharing with us the thoughts of the students. We have thought and talked about having students join us, and because it is summertime, it has been more challenging than we thought. We'll continue to consider that. And some of the programs that you talked about, I do recall that there are programs that have existed here in Union City before, and we will make a note that you've missed them. They're not there. I can remember recess with cops, and I can remember other things that used to take place in our schools that maybe we need to add back to our list of things that will humanize our police officers. Speaking of police officers, our next speaker, Dan Rodriguez, is going to join us and talk with us about being a police officer here in Union City, his experiences, his thoughts, and any recommendations he may have about how we might strengthen that relationship. If we could promote Stan, we'd look forward to seeing and hearing from him.
Sent Stan an invite, so he just has to confirm.
He is there as an attendee. Can we promote him?
Yeah, I did. Well, I invited him, so he just has to accept the invite.
Okay. There he comes. Hopefully we can see him. Dan, are you there? There you are. We can see you.
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. Welcome.
Oh,
We're looking forward to hearing from you.
looking forward to speaking to you guys tonight.
Okay, well, the floor is yours, and Emma will track your time and give you a little warning when you're just about out. So the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, first, I just wanted to thank the committee for giving us the opportunity to come and talk to you from a police perspective, from me being able to represent the hardworking men and women of the Union City POA. I appreciate Marcus's last comments, and I'm going to touch on some of those things and hopefully give a little bit of a perspective from us. I just wanted to kind of start off by just mentioning the George Floyd incident. We over here obviously agree with this entire thing being wrong and that it shouldn't have happened. So I just wanted to kind of mention that right out the gate with what we're discussing tonight. So along the same lines of sharing and the humanistic side of someone behind the badge, I just wanted to share a little bit about myself, kind of professionally and personally. I think a lot of times we do show up and we're basically an authority figure. We have a badge and a gun and all this protective equipment, and people don't recognize us for the human behind it. So I want to talk about myself a little bit. Most cops are pretty private, so it's kind of difficult for me to open up, but I think it's good for the conversation, what we're doing here with this whole committee and moving forward with our relationship issues. So a little bit about me. I was born in Hayward. I lived there for a few years before my parents moved to the city of Newark, where I grew up, and I eventually graduated from Newark Memorial High School. I met my wife in Newark also. And my senior year in high school, I had a law enforcement class that was taught by Mission Valley ROP, and it was taught by a Newark police officer. And from that time, attending that class, I made some connections with him, and I knew right away that that's what I wanted to do. And I found out at an early age that I wanted to be a police officer. So growing up in the Bay Area, growing up in the Tri-City area, I was spoiled by the diversity of the community. I embraced it and had a lot of friends from different cultures. Professionally, I started working at the PD at 19 as a paid police cadet. Just prior to that, I was a law enforcement explorer with Union City. So after working a few civilian assignments, I became a police officer about 25 years ago. I worked a variety of assignments, and I became a sergeant in 2014, and I currently supervise our traffic unit. So we're the folks that ride around on motorcycles that everybody gets worried about getting a ticket. So most people don't enjoy getting a ticket, and I understand that, but that is the role that I have. A little bit more, I'm a current Explorer advisor. So if you don't know what explorers are, those are our youths that are dealing with potential interest in law enforcement, and we do like some work experience stuff with those kids as well. I have a teaching credential. After receiving my bachelor's degree, I actually taught the Mission Valley ROP law enforcement class at James Logan High School for 10 years. I'm currently a substitute for that class just because of all the stuff that I have going on. It just became too much for me to juggle between both jobs. But I did enjoy that job. We have an entire spreadsheet of kids that were from our Union City law enforcement class that have gone on to work a variety of different jobs in law enforcement. And we have probably a half dozen that are police officers here to this day in Union City. So I'm pretty proud of that fact and how we kind of connect with our youth. Personally, I've been married for about 25 years. This August, it'll be 25 years. My background is that I'm Puerto Rican. My wife is Mexican. So I'm going to give you a perspective from a Hispanic officer, and that's the only perspective I can give you. I can't really comment on on other officers' perspectives that come from different backgrounds or different cultures. So I'm going to share that with you. I have two children. I have a 22-year-old daughter that lives in Oakland, and I have a 17-year-old son who's about to be a senior in high school. We don't live in the area currently. We live in the Central Valley, but I can just tell you that I'm sensitive to a lot of the minority issues that are going on, not just here, but everywhere in California. I just briefly want to mention that I have some family members that are Norteño gang members. And unfortunately, my nephew was shot and killed in a gang-related incident in Stockton. So I have that perspective of gang-related stuff related here to Union City and empathy when we deal with things of that nature. Also, a little bit about some of the stuff that Reverend Brown talked about last week is I'm a Raider fan, and I've been wearing Raider stuff, and I've gotten treated in a particular way for dressing in the manner in which I dress just based on my favorite NFL team. So I have the same perspective that Reverend Brown has, and I just made a connection with him when he mentioned that last week. So we are humans behind the badge. I think it's important that we're not immune from any sort of family drama, relationship issues, issues with our kids. We have bills, stress, things of that nature. Anything that anyone else would have, we have very similar worries. This job is very unique, and the profession of law enforcement is very unique. And we have to consider some of the things that we have to do on a day-to-day basis. I've had the unfortunate incidents, such as pulling a deceased kid out of a pool in a drowning incident, and then remaining on the job for the rest of the day because we didn't have staffing issues to be able to facilitate me being able to tap out or things of that nature. So, there's a different perspective behind the badge, and we want people to know that we come to work with the best intentions in mind, and we're here to serve those people, and we don't want them to have some sort of fear of prejudice or being targeted as a group. That's important to us. So we want to recognize that we encounter people under unusual circumstances. It's usually a negative comment. Rarely do people go, "Oh, thank goodness, Union City PD's here." We recognize that. They're typically the victim of a crime. They have something going on in their lives that require us to assist them with some sort of problem, or it's some sort of traffic stop. We've stopped them for speeding, for talking on their cell phone, something that is negative in nature. So we understand that. We know that these contacts can be difficult. We try to do the best job possible to remain professional, and we recognize that each contact that we have with someone may be their very limited number of contacts in their entire life with law enforcement. So those contacts represent myself as a person. They represent me as a police officer. They represent my agency and the overall picture of law enforcement as a whole. And so that's a really difficult thing to come to work to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But that is the reality of what we do. So let's get into the meat and potatoes a little bit. I already mentioned the George Floyd incident. Not a single cop in this agency feels that incident was validated, justified, or anything. So I will reiterate that as well. We understand why people are angry and upset. We're angry and upset because guess what? Wearing a badge and a gun, you go, oh, here we go, another incident that is going to cause us drama in our day-to-day tasks because we had nothing to do with that. It's in another state, but guess what? We all get lumped in together because unfortunately, this is what the issue is. The issue is how we end up judging an entire group based on the actions of a few. And so this is kind of the issue that's going on currently, and we recognize that, but it's difficult on our end as we try to do the right thing every day. Something else we're concerned about is the constant negative stories that are on the media. Unfortunately, modern day law enforcement's been vilified by the media. We've been an issue with politics and things of that nature, and it's ruined our morale for our profession. And personally, I feel that this is the most noble profession on the planet. And the reason that I do is because we put ourselves out there in harm's way for the benefit of others. And I think that's a pretty noble thing. I've had friends that have been killed in the line of duty, serving in the surrounding communities. And so this job is dangerous, and we have to recognize that fact. But as a union president, I'm not going to roadblock any type of things that our police chief pushes for change. We recognize that some police reform needs to occur, and I think we're open to that. But I also want to recognize the fact that California leads the nation in law enforcement training. We are considered the top shelf. Everyone comes here to train with us from not only other surrounding states, but from all over the world to train with California law enforcement. So we are top shelf. We are typically the ones that are doing progressive things in law enforcement. Just to give you guys an example, it's body cameras. Some agencies don't have body cameras, and you can go back east and deal with this on a global perspective, but we've had them for years, and it's just become the norm for us, and we're used to that. It shows that we're being progressive. We also want to point out that we denounce racism of any form, but we also don't want to be lumped into the category that the media shows us in, that we're all racist, because there's some examples or stories of incidents where officers are not acting appropriately or doing the right thing. So it's hard for us to accept that. I don't want to ever be accepted as someone that's racist. So that's a hard label for me to accept. And I think most of us here at this agency feel the same way, because you're calling us something that we know in our hearts we're not. And so, I guess this is the dialogue, how we go about making our relationships better and proving that to everyone that's out there. We would be in support of databases that categorize officers that are no good or dirty, or they've been fired, or they've quit in lieu of termination. We're in support of that, because I'll be honest with you, no one here wants to work with those type of people. I don't care. They are a black eye for our profession. We don't want to work with them. We want them to stay away from Union City, have nothing to do with us. So we would be in support of that. Liability issues for California cops are overwhelming. We have the constant worry about being injured or killed, and also facing jail time for following the law and policy. So that's kind of a scary time for us. We do things by policy and law, and then there's times that things come up that we actually can potentially face jail time. So that's a really difficult thing. We feel like we can't win in certain situations, even though our intentions are good. And so real quick, I want to talk about some of the things that we're doing well here in Union City. So some of the things we're doing well is we're trying to get involved more with community-based things. We're constantly involved with Centro. You'll see us around at the holidays with sponsoring families, sponsoring needy people in need, getting Christmas presents to kids, all these type of things that we want to point out that we're doing in the community. We got New Haven scholarships, autism awareness, Pink Patch for cancer, Special Olympics. Some of the other things that we're involved in is Coffee with the Cops. We know that everyone has the opportunity to come and sit down and have coffee with us in a less of a stress-free environment, where we have the time to interact with the public and hear what their needs are, show some empathy to their issues, and deal with them in that manner. We do connect with the kids. I've already mentioned Explorers. I've mentioned the law enforcement class at Logan. We have officers that off-duty coach sports, jiu-jitsu. They mentor youth, and they're involved in many activities, not only here in the local community, but in the communities that they live in as well. We've tried to adapt to change. We have crisis intervention training that our entire agency goes through. That wasn't a requirement, but our agency stepped up to take that too. And that's how we reach out and recognize mental health issues. Mental health is probably the most underfunded thing here in Alameda County. I wish there was gobs of money that we could throw at mental health, and it would solve a lot of the issues that we're talking about. But unfortunately, everything requires money, and that stuff is highly underfunded. But we do have homeless outreach officers. We do a lot of referrals to YFS and the Caravan Project, and I think we've adapted those changes as these city programs come into place. But we wear a variety of hats, and we're expected to be at perfection, and that's a very difficult. Perfection is very difficult to be at. We don't have any crystal balls, but we want to help people with their problems, but at the same time, we don't want to be killed in the process of doing these things. So our job is inherently dangerous, and we recognize that. We want the general public to recognize that as well. So some of the things that we can improve on, and I'll try to be really quick as I blast through these. We are open to other units responding to incidents of homeless or mentally ill people. That would be outstanding. We are not against that. We think that's better for all the stakeholders involved. It's less of use of force potential for us, and that's great. We would love to see the cops unit come back. The cops unit was awesome, and they deal with a lot of the problems and things that we're talking about here, but those require money. And with our city struggling financially, I don't know how we're going to be able to do that. And when people talk about defunding the police, those are the exact type of programs that go away. I wanted to challenge the group to a test. The next time you're driving, guess the race and the sex of the driver in front of you. I think it's a very difficult thing to do, and I just challenge people when they say that we're targeting a particular demographic. Parents need to discuss interactions with the police and how to behave. Compliance is key. I've had this discussion with my own son on how to interact with law enforcement, and should you feel that you are targeted for a particular reason or for your demographic, just cooperate, be respectful, and I will address it at the front counter of the police department following that incident. So I think that's really important. Training. We need additional training. We don't need less training. We work for the lowest paid police department here in Alameda County, and we're probably the most underfunded agency. So I want to recognize that. Recruitment. The police should reflect the demographics of the community, 100%. We want to encourage minorities, women, people of different color and of cultures and backgrounds to join our ranks. But this seems very difficult to do when there's a lot of rhetoric out there for high school students that just say ACAB and F the police. How do we encourage our youngsters to get into this line of work when that's all they hear? They're not going to be encouraged to do that, and it hinders our progress with recruitment from these groups. Another thing, parents need to stop teaching their kids negative attitudes or biases. This is important because this is how racism is a learned behavior. So when a kid's behind us at a coffee shop and they're saying, the mom's saying, little Johnny, if you don't behave, this officer's going to put handcuffs on you, put you in the back of the car. For a 3-year-old that's already terrified to maybe come in contact with us, this is very negative. And we're teaching this learned behavior. And as these kids get older, this is why they're sometimes could be fearful of us. So we have to recognize that mom's intentions might be good, but we're also creating these biases towards us. Kind of what Melissa talked about earlier, the city and the PD need to educate people on when to call the police and how to report crimes or incidents of suspicious people to us. I think that is a very important topic because it puts us in a bad position if someone is just calling in a black or a brown person saying that they're suspicious and they make up something that they see them possibly having a weapon, and we respond in a certain way. And how are we to know this person is calling in these type of calls, and they're very negative contacts for us? Law enforcement is the only job that can get criticized for doing both your job and not doing your job. So I just want to touch on a couple things in closing because I know I've gone long and I appreciate everybody's patience. We want to build trust with the community through this type of dialogue and discussion. But recognize that we feel very unappreciated at times because we are sacrificing our lives when we come to work every day. And we don't have to reside here to make a difference in the quality of lives for the people that live here. We're very tired and we're doing the best job we can with what the resources that we have. We recognize people can feel a certain way about UCPD. I can't tell people how they can feel, nor can people tell me how I feel. I can just show empathy to that and provide a different perspective. Our hearts are in the right place when we come to work to serve the community in a professional way, and we want to respect all. We encourage people, if they feel targeted by racism, to file a complaint. I'm a sergeant in this agency, and I'm a supervisor, and I'm held to those high standards. And we want to research these things. If we find that there is a problem officer, we need to figure that out and get rid of them as soon as we can. We recognize that racism exists in the world, and the police department wants to be part of the solution, not the problem. My hope is that eventually we can judge people by their character and not by their skin color. Integrity and respect do not require any money and are free of charge. So that's what I just wanted to close out with you guys. I really appreciate the opportunity to give you guys a perspective from police officers here, the hard-working men and women of the PD. I think all of our intentions are good every day. And I hope that those that have had bad experiences don't have any further bad experiences with us, but this is where the dialogue comes into play. So we want to be part of the solution, not the problem. We're here, we're listening, we recognize and we hear what people are saying, and we want to basically affect change in that way. So thank you. I'm sorry I went long.
Dan, you did great, and it was good to see a human face on the police officers. We can't see your badge or your gun, which makes you even more human. So thank you for joining us. We
Thank you
appreciate
for
your
having me.
thoughts. Many of the thoughts you mentioned, we've heard from other members of the community, and we will make sure that they're included in our recommendation. So thank you so much for joining us. All righty, those are our two speakers for tonight. And at this time, we have on the agenda committee comments. So this is an opportunity for the committee to make any comments you want. It can certainly be on things you've heard from the speakers, or it could be on anything we've covered so far before we move into our public comments. So let me start again with you, Melissa. Would you like to make any comments at this time?
Yes, thank you. I would just like to say thank you to both of our speakers for coming and speaking to us tonight. Mr. Lamb, thank you so much for bringing the perspective of the students and the school district to this committee. I really enjoyed hearing about, what your interactions with the police department have been like, what the students' perceptions of police are, and your suggestions for improving the relationships between the youth and the police. Really appreciated that. And Mr. Rodriguez, I really appreciate you coming and speaking to us and being honest with us about the challenges that the police are facing and what we can do to do better as a community and make policing better in this community. So thank you both for coming tonight.
Thank you, Melissa. Pat, would you like to make some comments or observations?
Yep. Thank you for both speakers also. I just want to say, wow, they were really very good speakers. I was going to touch on one of the problems that was mentioned by Marcus about students being scared of police officers, and Sergeant Rodriguez or Stan mentioned that it's also one of the problems of parents telling the children that if you don't behave, the police will get you. And I do that sometimes. I did that when the kids were young, so I'm guilty of that. So and I'm trying to change it with my grandchildren, not telling them that people of authority are not to be feared. They should be respected and should be understood. And with Stan, you brought up a lot of points or stories about, first of all, about you and about every police officers. I worry about police officers going out because they are really in a very dangerous position. And I know that your families are also worried about you when you go out. Your, maybe your children and your wife will say, "Well, is he coming back alive?" So, and that's very true. And also, some people are just like what you said. Union City is one of the most underfunded and also the fewest number of officers in Alameda County. And maybe you think you are unappreciated, but you are. I appreciate you personally, and a lot of people in Union City appreciate our Union City police officers. So that's one of the supports that you can give to our hardworking police officers. The COPS unit is a very popular thing for me. So thank you for mentioning that. I know it will be very expensive. Right now, it's an expensive program because Union City is having a budget problem. So anyway, I appreciate both speakers. Thank you Lauren and Emma for inviting them and speaking and let them speak today. It was a very good presentation. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So I know that Michelle likes to be the last speaker of the day, so I'll go to you, Jonathan.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, and I'd echo both the committee members ahead. Thank you very much, Marcus and Stan, for coming and presenting and giving your perspectives and being honest with us. When I was listening to Marcus talk, I was wondering what we can do to address those, what he was saying about the small experiences that have, the small negative experiences that have colored students' perspectives of police. You know, how do we face those challenges? There was something in the report that I gave a presentation on earlier that I didn't speak about in the presentation. And it talked about having victims come and talk about interactions with police. And it made me wonder also about the students. So yeah, officers going into classrooms and talking to students, and if that would be a re-traumatizing event for some students who have had traumatic experience with the police in the past, and you know what would be appropriate to handle things like that. For Stan, I truly appreciate you humanizing yourself. I know that very few police officers share much about themselves, and it's a very private industry, and that the dangers you face are real, and that you took an oath to do it. You did it voluntarily, so I appreciate that very much. Nothing else.
Thank you, Jonathan. Michelle, do you have some closing thoughts for the committee?
Yes, I also want to thank our speakers for sharing their times, their thoughts, and also some of their concerns. I also hope that we will also get some students to come and also talk to the community as well. And I also hope that we can find ways to import mental health to assist our officers when they need the assistance for themselves, as well as for our community. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So our speakers were outstanding, and what I would put out there for Marcus, if you know of some students that you think their parents would be supportive of them talking with us, do send us an email and let us know how to reach them. We are going to reach out to our own youth commission and see if there are members of our commission that would be open to talking with the committee. It is summertime, and that may be more challenging, but it is on our list of things to do. And between Emma and Lauren and myself, we'll figure out how to get the youth voice here. I think it would be very important. And Stan, again, I just want to thank you for showing up and putting a human face on policing. We do intend to ask a couple of other colleagues of yours to join us and share their experiences, and we do plan to have the chief join us in early August. So we will get additional perspectives on things that the police right now are thinking about that maybe we could do differently, or things that have worked in the past that we've stopped doing. So thank you so much for joining us and putting a human face on policing. So with that, we're going to move to public comments. As I mentioned early in the meeting, if you are on the line and you want to make a comment to the committee, just hit the raise your hand button, and Emma will have access to that, and she'll be able to acknowledge you and promote you to a speaker. So this would be a time. We've got some time on the agenda. We've set aside about 30 minutes. Each speaker could have about 3 minutes to talk with us if there are individuals who have things they would like to share. So Emma, do you have some hands that are up at this time?
No, we don't have any hands up right now.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to give it a few seconds or.
Well, I'd just like to say also, if you don't want to speak to us at this time, you can always send us a written comment at communications@unioncity.org. We'll receive your written communication and it will be read into the public record at our next meeting. Okay, if there aren't any comments, Emma, I'm going to move on. you let me know if you think that's where we are or if we should wait a few minutes.
I think we can move on. We already announced it in the chat a couple of times.
Okay, very good. All right, then, moving on, the next item is good of the order. And the good of the order is an opportunity for committee members to share any closing thoughts that they haven't had an opportunity to express. They may have to do with the agenda. They may have to do with things you'd like us to do in the future and things that we might need to add to our action items. So as we move through good of the order, let me start with you first, Michelle. Are there things that you'd like to say in closing before we wrap up tonight's meeting?
No, I think I'm good tonight.
Okay. Jonathan?
Nothing for good of the order tonight.
Okay. Pat?
Yeah. Another good meeting. Thank you.
Okay. And Melissa?
Just really enjoying hearing from all of our community members, and this was a great meeting. So thank you, staff and everyone.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa. We have been working on the agenda. May I just take this moment, Lauren, to ask you to remind the committee of some of the upcoming speakers that we have confirmed and the public so that if they don't have this meeting on their calendar going forward, they can get it on there.
Sure, I had a feeling you were going to ask that, so I brought up our list.
Okay, good.
So next week on July 30th, same time at 6:30, same link, we're going to have Ricky Singh, who was recommended to us by Commissioner Shahi Singh, or Singh Shahi, sorry. Darlene Green, who comes from the, I just want to get this right, Darlene Green from the Afro-American Cultural and Historical Society. And we'll have Chief Robert Chenault, who is the, I believe it's the Chief of DA Inspectors from our Alameda County District Attorney's Office. Those are the three speakers on July 30th. And then the following week, and excuse me, let me take a look at the calendar just to make sure I don't get this wrong. The following week on August 6th, same time, the meeting will start at 6:30. Same link information. We will be having Police Chief Renetti joining us, and I think we're trying to secure a few more people onto that calendar as well.
Okay. And if anyone who's listening from the public knows of someone they think we should speak with, don't hesitate to send us an email through our communications channel, and we will do our best to reach out. This is an opportunity for us to get as much feedback as we can from the community so that when we go to the City Council, we can say that we heard from as many people from the community, as many sectors of the community, and that we have captured your thoughts and your ideas so that when we make our recommendations, they do represent what the community feels. Okay, Lauren has covered our final item, which would be the dates for our upcoming meetings. If there's nothing else that is pressing that we need to hear from, I think we've completed our agenda tonight and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much for being here with us and for making your valuable contributions. Good night.
Good night.